Hi, everybody. I'm Kara Williams-Pierce, and these are my amazing colleagues. And so we're each going to take just a minute to say who we are and what sort of design classes we've been teaching to undergrads. So I've been teaching user-centered design, a required course for advanced undergraduates in our information science program. And I've also been teaching prototyping and development studio, which will become a required course, but in our information design program. And both of those courses involve going through multiple cycles of the design process. We don't have to go in order.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Victoria Van Heining. Apparently we're partly going in order. I have also taught 362 in the past, this undergraduate design course that Kara mentioned for upperclassmen. And I taught it once asynchronously during the pandemic and one synchronously, both times online. And I will pass it down.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tammy Clegg, and I'm an associate professor in the College of Information Studies. And I have taught the same design classes as Carol, the INST 362, which is user-centered design, and INST 367, which is the prototyping and design studio for the technology and information design new major. And I'm also the director of that major. And I would say, like, I also have had some other experiences, sort of teaching, but in informal context of co-design, or I think teaching co-design in informal settings. So I did a postdoc when I first got to the University of Maryland for 2 years, where I got to learn the design process and how to do design through engaging in, or being a facilitator in the Kids Team Participatory Design Program, where we work with kids ages 7 through 11. And had them come in twice a week to do design, do design work. So that was really where I honed in those skills. And then also I've had opportunities to work with church groups as well, to help them to learn about how to use design thinking and design thinking processes in their ministry activity.
Hello, my name is Jason Aston. I teach design, graduate and undergraduate level. For undergraduates, I teach data visualization, which has a heavy design aspect to it, as well as visual design for HCI. So understanding user experience and interfaces, the visual aspect of those. And as well, I have a course in the information design program, cross-curricular communication design, which talks, it's essentially about the design of the communication around the things that we make.
Hi, I'm Hira Lee. I'm a new lecturer at UMD. I just joined UMD last fall semester. So as Carol and Tammy, I was also teaching user-centered design, INST 362. And for undergrad, I'm teaching capstone projects and UX research method class.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a wide variety of class content. Undergrads, everyone's had some experience working with graduate students. Some classes are required, some classes are huge, fully online asynchronous, some classes are smaller and in person. So we have this super wide range. And so my first question for the panelists, what's something you've heard about happening in someone else's design class that you've absolutely loved and maybe stolen?
Actually, it's not from UMD. Is it okay to share? But because the idea was so brilliant. So it's actually from Dr. Amy Hurst. She taught this UI, user interface development, prototyping development class, which was encourage students to design some interfaces for fictional characteristics with any fictional scenarios, combining with wearable device. So it was very fun, I think, class, because you just pick up the characters from any cartoons, movies, novels. So yeah, you can see creativity from the students.
How do you use that in your class?
How would
Yeah,
I
like
use-
what's an example assignment?
So basically you try to think about the cartoon character first, and then what features or interface would be useful for this character. And then later with that prototype, you have to actually be that character and then act and then make a movie, a little short movie. So yeah, it's really fun project.
I love it. Tammy?
So one of the things I saw when I was in graduate school as a teaching assistant was that the design activities that actually like had the students to go outside of the classroom and sort of do scavenger hunt types of activities and bring things back from the building and things like that. So I really love doing those types of activities. And one thing that I also saw from Allison Druin that I love that was along those lines that I have stolen is that she would have before class, she would put out of order signs on the men's and women's bathrooms. And then she would actually take, and this is, not, like I know now it might not be, you would do it a little bit differently, but like she would take people who are used to using the women's bathroom and she would send them into the men's bathroom and vice versa. And then she would have them actually like just do observations for a few minutes and then bring them back into the classroom and say, design the bathroom of the future. And the idea behind that is the sort of ethnographic perspective that, there are often these places that you don't get to go into. And when you get to go into those places, you observe and notice things that you wouldn't notice in those spaces that you go into every day. And so using that to inform your design.
Yeah, I have one experience that involves someone up on this panel, Dr. Caro. So I'm new faculty as well, and one of the things that I grappled with in coming here is just trying to exert complete control over how my class and my courses run. And Dr. Caro invited me to one of her classes for a class called Games as Emergent Experiences. And when I arrived and sat in class, I realized that the class was very much student driven. So allowing students to kind of take control and take the materials and teach the class from that. And I thought that was a really wonderful way to engage students and get students to learn from their peers. And the feedback that I heard from students, because we had similar students in both of our classes, was that it was just a wonderful, wonderful class to be in. So.
Well, possibly embarrassing Caro further, and also another colleague from whom I learned a lot, Stacy Sorlo, who's in the audience right before me. And something I believe I stole from Stacy when I started out was having the students do a best class, worst class, Jamboard, or when I'm now teaching in person, we do this with Post-its on the wall, and have students, without naming names and shaming anybody, say like what worked well for me as a learning modality in the past and what didn't, and frame that in a few different ways. And I've since gone and also read a little bit more about how other people do it in other pedagogical settings, and I found it just so helpful for setting a tone of how do we want to conduct ourselves as a unit for this semester. And I think it really helps to set you up for the project-based work that a lot of our design classes require. And yes, I learned a lot from Caro as well and stole many things, more than I can count.
I'm still stealing.
Feel free. I stole them from other people like Tammy, Wayne, Beth. Yeah. We're borrowing. I'll give it all back in the end. Okay, so what is something that you tried in a design class that did not work as planned? Did you tweak it and try again, or did you just give up because you realized it wasn't going to work for whatever reason? So tell me about your failures, is what I'm saying. I've got many to share, but yeah.
I have one that that I try every semester that I've taught this class in my visual design course, because I talk about color and the emotional potential that color has, and how we view it, how we see it, what they can do for a specific project. So I used to animate. I used to be a character animator, and I used to work on cartoons. And the idea of a color script was very common, right? Figuring out what the color story is of the entire animation or in the entire scene. So I set my students up with storyboards. I always try. I set them up with storyboards, and I have them do like a color pass over the whole thing to try and develop, to try and get the color of the scene to reflect the emotion that's in the actual storyboard. I think my students are bogged down by the first off, the amount of time that we have to do it, which is never enough time. And technically, like how they go about coloring. So sometimes they'll color like everything individually, and mind you, I give them like 30 slides to just go through. I'm like, oh, just do a color pass, real quick color pass. But whenever I get them back, they're like, everyone's skin tone is precisely picked out. It's like everything is like, and that wasn't, it's probably a failure of communication on my part, but like just trying to get them to just think high level view of color is very difficult, and still is very difficult. Even though like I've been trying to like hit at this every single semester, I never get it right.
That just makes me think there's something there between like the concrete and the abstract, and I feel like that's a theme throughout all of our design courses. Like, how do we get people to step back from the weeds and embrace the messy, or embrace imperfection, or not focus on straight lines in Figma? And it seems like this is just another face to that. Like, get away from thinking about an individual tree. Like, let's think about the forest and how to support that. So. Thank you. And also, I would fail that assignment too. I'd be a terrible student.
Okay. Apparently, I'm holding a hot mic. So, I think one of my early failures. The second time I taught the course, I tried to really, really strongly, perhaps even very. I don't know. I tried to limit my students from taking on projects that were like, we don't like this university website or whatever functionality. And the particular one that I'm thinking of shall remain not named right now. But I really wanted them to try to center users sufficiently beyond their immediate day-to-day experience. And nobody pushed back and said, Profi, we're not going to like get on board with that. But they just like quietly sort of went and chose that project anyway. And I realized that as much as we really do want them to be able to make space for the views of others and really get into their empathy mapping and like, all of those things that are good about design, sometimes I think at a first pass, starting with what a bit like writing what might actually be a good idea.
Can I have a follow on to that? Because I feel like that's also something that I always struggle with, is that, to help students to think outside of the box about what they could be working on. And so I think they always do kind of gravitate to those same projects, and just trying to help them. And then you face the challenge of when they do step outside of the box and they want to help children with mental health, well, then they've got to find the counselors, and they've got to find the kids, and then you don't know how to get them access to those, to those groups in the ways that they should. So sometimes I feel like that's also one of the things that I struggle with. And also I would say that I struggle to, so in the example that I gave of like sending my students outside of the classroom, I love to do that. And one of the ways that I failed before was like the first time I tried to do this activity where, I'm really big on the students understanding the people that they're designing for. So putting a lot into the user research part of the process. And so I had this idea, and I talked to people at the TLTC, and they were like, yeah, you can do this, right? So you send the students, so you tell them, okay, I'm going to give you some fake scenarios, right? Like, and they're based on where you are on campus. So if you're next to Stamp, it might be like, hey, you're going to design a new app for the coffee shop. So you need to go and observe the coffee shop, go interview people at the coffee shop and things like that. And then you say, hey, so this is your scenario, now go do it, right? And so you send them out, and they always look at you wide-eyed like, wait, you want us to do that? You want us to go talk to people now? Like, yes, go. And so the first time I did it, and actually I experience this every time really now, but I know to expect it. The students, maybe if I was here and I asked them to go to a bus stop that was like maybe 10 minutes away, they came back in like 5 minutes. We're done. Like, you didn't even walk over to the bus stop. You could even, you could have even gotten over there that fast. And then you look at it. Okay, well, what did you find out? What did you learn? And you hear what they did and what they saw. And it was very kind of shallow work with the people, right? Like, we just asked them a couple of yes or no questions, but then you don't really know anything about design. So then what you do, you have 20 minutes. So now go back out. I want you to go back out and I want you to find out these types of things. And so you can work with them sort of on a more individual basis, but also I want to get to the point where I am able to like send my like academic peer mentors out with them, or get sort of a strong TA base to be able to go out with them and sort of serve as coaches in that space, but I haven't been able to do that.
So for my case, I want my students to explore or get inspired from other fields, not only for UI, UX, the STEM field. So I wanted my students to read actual text, books, paper books or written text instead of watching YouTube's video clips, but that one didn't happen much. And also they are so interested in reading the UX field books instead of like philosophy, totally like human arts side. So that was kind of challenging for me. Yeah.
Thank you all. Yo, please.
I'm sorry, because I meant to say with Victoria is kind of getting the students to think outside of the box. And I think this is one of the things that like Wayne, Dr. Dave, Carol, and I kind of came up with together. But we observed, and probably Stacy too, right? But like we observed that the students oftentimes in their designs, they will gravitate towards sort of what's the things that they're used to. So what you'll get is like a lot of students coming up at the end of the semester with apps. And so they designed this new app, and then at the end of the semester they'll wish that they would have gone like pushed further outside the box. So we have them. What we came up with was like, okay, you in your design process, the first thing we want you to do is come up with 3 different design alternatives that are very different, and one of them has to be a wild and wacky idea. And that, like, the ways I feel like that has failed is sometimes they don't necessarily include technology in that wild and wacky idea. It might be like, oh, to increase exercise, we want you to get a dog. You're gonna walk this dog, right? The dog is gonna make you exercise. But also, they oftentimes will come up with nice, wacky, really, really good, wacky ideas, but will be afraid to pursue them in their final product. And I still haven't figured out how to encourage that pursuit.
No, yeah, that's a problem that comes up in my class as well. And however much I kind of cement it in sort of my professional work outside of school, I always so when I'm bidding on something or developing a RFP, I'll always submit along with some safe, designs. I'll include something like really wacky as well in the hopes that they can see that vision, But it's I think it's an appropriate. I think that's a really great tool, a great guidelines to give them when you're developing that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a point in my classes where I have the students in class brainstorm together, like essentially pain points in their lives, to sort of like have a broad idea. And then from there, we drill down into themes and so on. But one year, I think it's last time I taught undergrad design, actually, the pain point that came up was capitalism. And I was like, I'm putting it on the list. That's fine. If a group of you wants to redesign capitalism or whatever, that's okay. I'm not going to tell you no.
Achievers.
The what?
Yeah, they're achievers.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody actually picked that group to work on. So yeah, sorry, everybody. So the reason I love questions about our failures is because I feel that the fields that I am in generally don't do enough to celebrate our failures. And I think in teaching, we can really become sort of like insular within ourselves to like, if we fail, that means we're not a good teacher. We didn't think, strongly enough about what would happen or so on. But failing is part of teaching. It's also part of learning. See all of my research. Okay. But, and so there's these design activities or approaches or thoughts or goals, that we've tried and they didn't quite go as planned. So maybe we tweaked them. Maybe we gave up. Maybe we're just going to think about it before we try it again. But I also think there's a pattern of sort of consistent struggle in teaching, not just undergrads, but anybody, the design field for the first time. And so like every semester, I have a particular way that I start the class for the first month. And it is pretty much me not answering questions. I make them look at each other and answer each other's questions, and me dismissing all discussions about grades because I'm trying to get them to not think about grades. And of course there are, exceptions to that and so on, but I'm trying to get them to not center me, to center their group and their peers, and to not think about building a product that they will exchange for a good grade, and that I give them the grade as opposed to like they take ownership of their learning. And part of, so that is something that I feel like I have to redo with every new class, every semester. And this is not just design and not just undergraduates, is part of this thing. So what is something that every semester you're like, okay, here is a big object or pattern that I want to fight against, and I have to do it every semester with every new group of students? And maybe that's an imprecise question. Okay.
So for my case, these design projects, it's team-based projects, right? So given the UX nature, you are going to work with many people from different fields. So you have to pick up the vibe, how to work with other people. But I don't know, maybe the Z generations, they want to maybe work alone. I just got that vibe because even though I gave the team project, they, instead of got together, discuss each other at the same time, everything was kind of assigned. Hey, you take this role, you should take this role, and then later just combine all together. So I feel like that one was really challenging.
Yeah, and I want to follow that up. It's absolutely a challenge, and I'm torn on this because part of design is working in a good, powerful, collaborative group. But part of it is also the way that you interact with that group or think about design on your own, or when you're doing the reading or prototyping something. And so like our students often are learning to what it is like to be in a good collaborative group, and learning about design and learning about the intersection was a little bit different from both. And so it feels like a huge intellectual lift we're asking of them. I don't know how to perfect that. And it might just be like, this is part of the natural struggle that we're just gonna see. Yeah, I don't know.
Can I say, I struggle with all of these things that y'all have mentioned too. And I think one thing that was helpful for me this last semester was the studio format of the class. So the class was 3 hours for undergraduates, which is very different for undergraduates, but once a week. And the expectation was that you're gonna come in and we're gonna work on your projects here. And I know for me, sometimes I had to actually get in and actually, this is from the co-design experience, right? Like as a co-designer in a kids team group, when the kids are designing, you're designing too. And so I tried to kind of take that, at least as much as I could, into my class, where it was kind of okay, one student's not here right now, Dr. Tammy's about to be your teammate, right? And so we're gonna work together and we're gonna build this, this thing. And or I would form a team with my TAs, and we would actually kind of create our own project as well. And so what we were trying to do there is to model to the students what that sort of collaborative process can look like. But it's still a struggle, because there's the reality that you need to go, you need to write something, and you're not gonna, a lot of times you're not gonna write something as you're sitting together in a group. So, but I think that studio format really helps to have that format where, we're gonna come in, we're gonna put on some design music, we're gonna sit at this table, we're gonna work on this together, and the TAs and the professor is gonna be the coaches.
Nobody has to talk. If you don't want to answer this question, you don't have to.
No, the thing that was on my mind, I'm coming from English literature background via working in crowdsourcing and working with really diverse teams, web developers, astronomers, ecologists, and then coming through a library setting and then landing here. And so one of the things I've been trying to figure out since arriving in 2020 is like, how do I calibrate my the way I was trained, which is a lot of reading and a lot of writing and a lot of independent work, you know, and a lot of formative assessment along the way. So sort of in some ways, probably the opposite. The first time I taught design, I just assigned way too much homework for everybody, for me included, to grade. And I think I like nearly accidentally killed all of my TAs. And so trying to figure out how do you make space to see the learning, particularly with these online classes, and give a chance to like hear people thinking through or see them working through ideas. And I think there's a broader conversation to have about like, what's the best modality for us to teach design? I love the idea of the 3-hour-a-week class. That sounds great. And really making people try to connect also beyond that class and have accountability within their teams and their groups. And I don't think I've figured that out yet, but I think making some co-working time in class is a nice alternative to a lot of homework and trying to assess like individually, does this student who might be 1 in 90 or 1 in 150, like, are they really getting it, you know, because they've taken a quiz? Like, I'm not sure that that's the most helpful, you know, just saying. I think, but it has a place, but I think it's just, I think that modality question is hard.
Okay, we can all just stare at Jason. No, I'm kidding. Okay, we have, I think we started 2 minutes late, so we're gonna take, oh, we have 5 minutes? 6 minutes? Yes. Okay. Yeah.
One thing I think that I know I personally struggle with, you're talking about failures too, right, is administration. So I am bad at like checking email, at, you know, like maybe making sure that the assignments are like, if you tell them like, oh, you get an extension, that's updated in Elms and, you know, all those kinds of things. And I think there's like a growing sort of expectation from students, especially that I see on the evaluations, that like, oh, you know, that all of those things are going to always be so clearly demarcated for them in every way. Like, she's going to announce it in class, she's going to put it on Elm, she's going to send me a reminder, she's, you know, all those different things. And I feel like we have to be careful. Well, one of the things, I think Carol and I were talking about this on one of our walks. We were that we want to make sure that we're training our students to be good professionals. You know, because a lot of times with the design mentality, there's this sort of, you know, maybe a stereotype that you can be sort of disorganized or sort of like, you know, that kind of thing. And it's like, no, we want to make sure that our students are at least developing basic sort of professional skills so that we're doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to be neighbors with Tammy, so we go on walks and nerd out about stuff like this. And so we've been talking about, like, you know, a boss isn't going to like post on Elms a full description of what they mentioned offhandedly to ask you to do. They might not even put a deadline. They might say sometime soon. They're not going to scope it for you. They're not going to say 5 pages exactly double spaced with 1-inch margins, etc. And we really do, like, now students expect like multiple comprehensive reminders that all match up. But I tweak a lot of stuff in my class on the day, depending upon what students do in the class, which means I have to update it in multiple places if I'm going to take that route. So I don't. It means if I give you the details in class, that's where you get the details. It can be awkward at first for students. It can be hard for them to remember that, but it's like, you're the one here learning. Yeah. So, okay, last question for all of you. What is the like 1 or 2 pieces of advice you'd give somebody who is about to teach their first design class to undergraduates? And Hira is like, I've got all the answers right here.
You know, because I'm a new lecturer, right? So I have lots of tips for someone who started teaching at UMD. But I will just share one thing. I know you really want to teach everything. You just got graduated and you want to deliver all this knowledge to the students. But if you prepare 10 things, just pick one, because students can observe everything that you prepared. So that's what I want to say. Pick this important one.
I guess if I could do one, I would say I would say figure out how to enfold the idea of risk into your courses and how that's assessed. Because I think what we really want our design students to do is to experiment and explore, especially here, because they might not get that chance outside and you never know what they're going to uncover in that process.
I think as a designer trying to bring others into the process of design, I think a lot about ambiance. And I would encourage a new professor to think about that. So a lot of times when we come into classrooms, they may not be this big, right, or this sort of high tech, but they have this sort of formal feeling, and that sort of detracts away from that sort of ability to be wild and risky and be bold and come up with new ideas and things like that. So there are things that I think little things that you can do to build an ambiance. So bringing color into the classroom. So a lot of weeks my students would see me with this big wagon of crafting materials, and sometimes they didn't even use the crafting materials that day, right? But I think it was, and I'd be mad at myself for dragging the wagon, but I think it was important for bringing that in there just for the ambiance, right, of what we're going to do and what we're doing in this room. And we would have design music that we would play on the speakers, right, like when they were working. And the students they really enjoy that, but I think it also kind of sets this ambiance so that they know that they're safe to take those risks that we want to help them to take. And also tell them those things directly.
I learned the design music hack from Tammy, and it is amazing how much more lively the groups are. There's something like turning on that music doesn't mean like, shh, this is a classroom and learning is quiet. Like there's something that pushes again. They're like, oh, it's okay to be louder now. So I love that.
It's true. I walked into a classroom where I think someone stole that from you, and it was like, yeah, it was a whole different classroom for sure.
I think trying to make space for the students to take ownership of their learning and their projects, so echoing a number of things that have been said, and to have some accountability baked in, which can mean you're accountable for asking for clarification or for like checking in with each other, finding ways of documenting who's responsible for what. And I think I've worked in teams where that was done really well and other teams where that wasn't done super great. Ooh, and we're down to 0 time. So thanks.
All right. Thank
The
you,
end.
everybody. And feel free to come ask us stuff later.